presentar a mi querido amigo, pero también trainer, porque yo estoy certificada con Mario Sikora para los abordajes corporativos. Lo voy a presentar a Mario Sikora, que lo conocí en San Francisco en el 2010, cuando él iba a ser presidente entrante en el 2011 en la IEA Internacional. Mario Sikora es CEO de Awareness to Action International, eso quiere decir Conciencia en Acción Internacional. Es asesor de líderes en numerosas organizaciones multinacionales. Fue introducido al eneagrama en 1994 y comenzó a usarlo en su trabajo en 1997. Su enfoque es presentar el eneagrama de una manera clara y práctica, sin perder la profundidad del sistema. Mario es un expresidente de la Asociación Internacional de Eneagrama y ha enseñado su enfoque del eneagrama en más de 20 países de los 5 continentes. Autor o coautor de 5 libros, vive en las afueras de Filadelfia con su esposa, 4 hijos y 2 gatos. Lo pueden contactar en www.awareness2action.com. Hola Mario, hello, welcome.
Hello Viviana, hello everyone, welcome.
Hola Viviana, hola a todos.
I'm so happy to be here.
Estoy
I heard
contento
about
de estar acá hoy y escuché de mis gatos cuando hiciste la traducción. Ahí me di cuenta que me tocaba empezar. Es tan lindo para mí ver
screen when I was watching the video of Argentina. It made me bittersweet to know that it has been so long since I've been there, and Argentina.
Argentina ha tenido siempre un lugar muy especial aquí, mi padre vivió ahí por 10 años, entonces siempre habló muy bien de su tiempo en Buenos Aires. Así que me encanta estar acá con tantos amigos. Estoy maravillado de cuánta gente que no conozco hasta hoy, que están alrededor, que han estado alrededor del eneagrama por tanto tiempo y que he tenido la oportunidad de enseñar eneagrama en muchos lugares y ver también tantas caras nuevas y nuevos es muy estimulante para mí. Muchas gracias a todos por estar aquí y muchas gracias a la filial de Argentina y a todos los que organizaron esto. Y gracias por tenerme hoy con ustedes. Entonces la idea de esta sesión es el eneagrama en tiempos de transformación. Y es sin duda eso, este es el cambio dramático y la realidad es que el mundo, la vida está siempre cambiando, el mundo, y estamos en uno de esos periodos en los cuales esto se está acelerando dramáticamente. Entonces quiero compartir pensamientos con ustedes. Y les quiero contar cómo enseño el eneagrama, cómo voy a tratar de hablar despacio. Tenemos las traducciones, las traductoras, pero voy a tratar de hablar más lento, y si tienen preguntas, no duden en hacérmelas saber. Les pido disculpas por no hablar portugués o español. Entonces voy a compartir mis videos con ustedes. Mati, por favor, hacelo co-host para que pueda compartir la pantalla. Mario. Mati. Co-host. Necesita que lo hagas co-host.
I have power now. Okay, so the Enneagram in times of change is what we'll be talking about today. What I am going to do is talk first a little bit about the history of the Enneagram as I know it. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I think that if we want to think about where we are going, we have to understand where we have been. And so I want to talk a little bit about the history of the Enneagram. I want to talk about what I see as the four biggest challenges and the four biggest opportunities, or let's see, let me rephrase that, four big opportunities and four changes or that we see, okay? Hold on just a second. I'm going to change the way I share my screen so that you don't keep seeing messages. All right, great. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the history of the Enneagram a little bit. I'm going to talk about the challenges we face today and explore some of the opportunities that come along with those challenges. I am going to share 4 or 5 basic ideas that I think we need to hold in mind when it comes to teaching the Enneagram in these days. Okay. If you would like a copy of my slides, please send an email to me at the email mario@awareness2action.com. I would be happy to send you a PDF. Okay. So. All right. So the history of the Enneagram. Now, there are a lot of stories, a lot of mythology about the history of the Enneagram. I'm not going to go into all of that history. I think some of it is a little bit dubious, and I'm not sure that all of it is true, some of the stories that we hear. But I think that we can safely say that the Enneagram of
El enneagrama de la personalidad como lo conocemos apareció hace relativamente poco, conozco el caso. Y Chazo construyó sus ideas, creo que la primera vez que el enneagrama de la personalidad fue con Claudio Naranjo, la primera vez que se enseñó, y lo enseñó de una forma muy dramática. Chazo lo enseñó a mucha gente, y muchas personas han tenido sus propios ideas de cómo se enseñaba el enneagrama. Cuando yo primera vez me fue introducido el enneagrama en el 94, era una época muy diferente, y había algunos libros del enneagrama, había algunos pocos profesores, y la información que nos llegaba del programa no estaba muy disponible para las personas normales. Entonces fue una época muy estimulante, porque estaba aprendiendo de algo nuevo, profundo, dramático. Y yo sentí que había cambiado algo, había descubierto algo que había cambiado totalmente mi vida y la de muchas otras personas, y estaba muy entusiasmado con eso.
Sooner or later, the rest of the world will find out about the Enneagram, right? And I kept waiting for the Enneagram to become popular. For everybody that I talk to, when I say the word Enneagram, they wouldn't just say, what? What does that mean? Right? But they would know what the Enneagram is. That has taken many, many years to happen. Okay. But in the 1990s, there was this, I think, this burst of excitement about the Enneagram, and it started to spread. The International Enneagram Association, the International Enneagram Association started in about 1996, I believe it was. And it sort of stabilized the Enneagram in a way. It created affiliates, many of which you are members of. It had created conferences that could be held around the world that could share the teachings of many people, but it was still a very closed community. Whenever I would go to a global IEA conference, I would see a lot of people who looked like me, meaning they had gray hair and wrinkles on their faces. Okay. There were not a lot of young people. There were not a lot of people even in their 30s, or many people in their 40s. Most of them were in their 50s and 60s. That started to change when the internet came along. And the internet caused an explosion of information about the Enneagram. Okay. Now you can go on the Enneagram and Google the word Enneagram and find hundreds of thousands of sources of information about the Enneagram. And most of them are not very good, unfortunately. Okay. Most of them are somewhat frivolous. I recently discovered TikTok, which my children know about, and I even Googled Enneagram on TikTok, and there are thousands of videos about the Enneagram on TikTok of people doing dances and singing little Enneagram songs and things like that. The Enneagram, the horse has escaped the barn, as we say in the United States, right? It is not a thing that people can control anymore. It is something that is out in the public, and anybody who wants to can start saying whatever they want about the Enneagram. There are good things about this, and there are things that are maybe not so good about this that we have to think about, and we will discuss. Now we are into a new era, the COVID era and beyond. The COVID era has brought about a number of changes, okay, that I think affect the Enneagram, and we will discuss that shortly. Okay. So this is a very, very brief summary of how we got to where we are. Let's go a little further now and think about these changing demographics. Excuse me. So again, the world is changing. I look like the guy in the middle of the picture. Okay, I used to be the guy on the right side of the picture, you know, with the beard. Now I'm the one in the middle. But we take in information differently. Okay, I have 4 sons. My sons are older than this little boy in the picture, but looking at this picture makes me think of them because they take in information in a very different way than I did. I like to sit and listen to people in the same place they are. I like to read books. My sons like to read. They like to watch videos. They don't read. They like to watch videos on their phones. Okay. Not even an iPad or a laptop, but always on their phones. We have a generation of people coming up who absorb information very differently than we do. And if we want to be able to share the Enneagram with them effectively, we have to understand the way they take in information. Okay, so I'm going to discuss that briefly. But before we even get into that, I want to talk about the question of, does the Enneagram even matter anymore? Okay. Is the Enneagram something worth studying, something worth spending our time in? Anytime there is dramatic change in the world, I think it's an opportunity to question our assumptions, to reevaluate our commitments to things. I was introduced to the Enneagram in 1994. I have been working with the Enneagram professionally as an executive coach and consultant since 1997. That's 24 years now. Okay. I have worked with the Enneagram on 5 different continents and lots of countries and more companies than I can remember, with more people than I can remember. But we always have to ask ourselves, is this still something that's useful to people? And so I've asked myself that about the Enneagram. Is it something that I still want to commit my life to working with? And I've come to the conclusion that yes, I do. But I want to talk a little bit about why. I started having questions about the nature of reality when I was about 14 years old. I I remember very clearly wanting to try to understand God, try to understand what the universe was all about, all of these questions that many teenagers ask and many of us continue to ask as we grow into adulthood. Since then, I have explored many, many teachings in many, many different areas. And it is always something that has fascinated me. And it is always something that has been at the heart of my professional work as well as my personal work. And I've come to the conclusion that there are really only three questions that matter. Okay? The first question is, what is happening right now? What am I feeling? What am I experiencing? What is happening with and to the people around me? The second question is, what do I need to do next? Given what is happening, what needs to happen now? And the third question is, how can I be equipped to skillfully answer the second question? Right? Once I decide what needs to happen, how can I have what the Buddhists call skillful means, practices of wisdom, compassion, efficacy, so that I can bring contentment into my world and the world of people around me? And the Enneagram helps us to answer those three questions. What is happening right now? What needs to happen next? And how can I learn to do that skillfully? Okay? The Enneagram tells us what is happening now because it tells us how we go to sleep to ourselves. The inner triangle of the Enneagram represents how we go to sleep, how we lose ourselves, how we fall into our habitual patterns. Okay? It tells us at point 9 that each of us has the tendency to go on autopilot, to fall asleep, okay? To stay stuck in a pattern, to stop paying attention, to stop being present. And then at point 6, every so often we wake up, but it's the shock of events that wakes us up. It's not a conscious, deliberate, intentional waking up. It's the shock of the things around us. At the beginning of the Divine Comedy, Dante says, midway through life, I woke and found myself lost in the woods. And this is the experience so many of us have. We wake from our slumber, but we're filled with fear because we don't know what is happening to us and we don't know what to do next. And then at point 3, we create a story. We tell ourselves, this is it. This is where I am. This is what's happening. But usually those stories we tell ourselves are the same stories we have been telling ourselves our whole lives. And they're not very good stories, and they're not very true stories, and they're not authentic stories. But they allow us to go back on autopilot, to go back to sleep. Okay? So this is the dilemma we all face. This is what the Enneagram tells us, that we go to sleep to ourselves. And the psyche has mechanisms for keeping us asleep. So stories we tell ourselves, the next thing the Enneagram tells us, are rooted on 9 strategies, 9 worldviews that shape our narratives about the world and keep us asleep. Okay? We refer to those adaptive strategies as striving to feel something, right? They are strategies that help us to maintain a feeling, a comforting emotion. Okay? For me, as an Enneagram type 8, that strategy is striving to feel powerful. When I feel powerful, everything is fine. The problem is that sometimes I strive to feel powerful in ways that cause me and the people around me to suffer. And so the Enneagram tells us how we can release ourselves from that suffering. It tells us how we can wake up. It tells us, again, by reversing the cycle that we saw in the last triangle, how we can wake up and start practicing awareness. Make the intentional decision to pay attention, okay? To stop and to look and to listen and to feel. Right? And then it allows us to take control of our stories. to say that the limited stories that we have don't have to be the stories that rule us. I, as an 8, learn that what I thought it is that to be powerful is not the only option. There are other ways in which I can be powerful that allow me freedom to grow and develop and to mature. And each of us, whatever our Enneagram type is, can do the same thing. And this enables me to take different actions, right? Instead of just repeating the same old actions over and over and over again, the Enneagram allows us, it points us to actions that help us grow. So the Enneagram is worth continuing with. Okay? And that may be obvious. I think you wouldn't be here if you didn't believe this. But I think that we all need to stop and ask ourselves this question. Why are we doing this? Why are we working with the Enneagram? Let's talk about the challenges we face. And I will ask you if you have questions or comments to put them in the chat. Okay. I apologize for not being able to read them if you don't write them in English, but towards the end of the session, perhaps we can go through some of the questions and respond to those. Okay. So the challenges that I want to talk about break into 4 basic categories. Okay. Number 1 is COVID. And number 2 is the challenge of technology. Number 3 is the challenge of science. And number 4 is the challenge of social media. Okay. Now, again, each of these challenges comes with an opportunity. Every time of crises has brought about innovation in the world, okay? Reevaluation, exploration. Okay? And this time is no different. And these challenges are no different. So we want to look at these as opportunities as well as challenges. So the challenge of COVID. Right? COVID, as we all know, has caused a seismic shift in the world. Okay. I used to travel all the time, to go to places, to be with people, to talk about the Enneagram, to do my corporate work. I have not left my little basement here in Philadelphia in a year and a half now, almost, it feels like. Okay. Because the world is a different place. And one of the things we need to remember is that we don't even know what the world will look like on the other side of this. It feels like it's going back to normal here in the United States a little bit, but it's not completely normal. And if there's one lesson that COVID has taught us, is that we do not see disruption coming. Right? We're all dealing with COVID-19. We don't know if there's a COVID-22 out there or some other profound, dramatic change that will affect how we are. So COVID serves to remind us that we cannot be complacent. Okay, again, this is what the Enneagram tells us. We go to sleep. We live complacently. We keep doing the same things over and over again. COVID tells us we need to wake up in all aspects of our lives and be adaptive and responsive to the world as it is. The other message that that COVID tells us is that people are suffering. People are in pain. Okay. Not just physical pain that we see in the news all the time, not just the death and suffering, but the emotional pain, the feeling of isolation that people have. Okay. And the Enneagram can be a great tool for us to help alleviate that through developing a sense of community like this one is today, or just by being able to work more effectively one-on-one, or by being more compassionate and understanding of those people that we are trapped in the same house with for weeks and weeks and weeks at a time. Okay. My wife and I have 4 sons and 2 cats, as Viviana pointed out. It is a crowded house, right? And if I was not aware of the Enneagram, I'm sure I would have been divorced and would have probably shoved my children into a box somewhere many months ago. Okay. But the Enneagram reminds us to be compassionate. It reminds us that people are suffering and locked in their issues just in the same way we are struggling with ours. Okay. So COVID is an opportunity for practicing compassion. Technology. Technology makes life wonderful and it makes life difficult. Okay. If we look at this picture, not only are these people looking at other people on screens, but they are holding tablets in their hand. My sons carry these devices in their pockets, just like I do. And each one of us all the time is pulled toward this device, okay? Toward the screens, toward Netflix, toward Amazon, right? We're distracted all the time. Okay? Technology allows us to connect, but it also separates us. Okay? I was reading a article by a psychologist who designs video games recently. And she was talking about the things they keep in mind when they are designing a video game for people. And the first one is that attention is scarce, meaning, even though I am talking to you right now, I am still at some level tempted to go and scroll on Facebook, even though I am talking. Okay. And I'm sure that most of you, if you're not scrolling on Facebook now while I'm talking, you are thinking about it or being tempted to it or reading messages that you're getting. Okay. This is a significant challenge that we face. Okay. The second thing that these psychologists said is that perception is subjective, meaning although we all think we are objective, that we all think we see the world clearly, we do not. Okay? Every wisdom tradition tells us we see the world through a filter. Okay? We do not see the world clearly. We are struck by illusion. Okay? We are hindered by illusion. When we live in a world of technology, it is very easy for us to start making assumptions about people that we are increasingly disconnected from. Our neighbors, our coworkers, people on the other side of the country. That can cause divisions. That can cause us to start demonizing each other. It can cause us to start being less generous to people with whom we disagree, even if that disagreement is just on the way that the Enneagram should be taught. Okay. I'm always amazed at how angry and aggressive people get over Enneagram theory when they disagree with people. Right? It's so much easier to do that in a world that's driven by technology and separation of people. Okay? However, there is huge opportunity in this. The last time I looked, we had almost 400 people on this webinar, which is amazing. I don't know how many countries are represented, but I know we have people from Europe, North America, South America. Right? This could not have happened 5 years ago. So technology creates opportunity to come together if we use it wisely. The third thing that they teach game designers is that memory is faulty. Memory is flawed. We lose contact with our past. We lose contact with who we used to be. And it is more important than ever that we hold on to that, not just our intellectual heritage, okay, where the Enneagram has come from, but who we are truly. So technology is a challenge for us. It makes the flaws in the psyche all the more dangerous. and yet it creates opportunity. Okay. We deliver a certification program at Awareness to Action. And whereas we used to have to travel from one country to another, one continent to another to do the trainings, now we can sit in our homes and do the trainings, and people from all over the world can attend, just like they're doing today. And I'm sure the same thing is happening for each of you in your teaching of the Enneagram. Okay. The third challenge and opportunity is related to science. Okay. We live in a time where we are learning more and more about the psyche, about the way that the mind works than we ever knew before. Okay. We have to ensure that as we learn more about the way that the brain works, we incorporate that into our teaching of the Enneagram. Most of the ideas related to the way that the Enneagram is taught are pretty old. Okay. Now that is good. There is a lot of value in old teachings, okay, old wisdom traditions. But we also have to be aware that as we learn more about the way that we have evolved as a species, and as we learn more about the way the brain truly works, we have to be willing to adjust our theory of the Enneagram. Okay? This is a big challenge. There's a psychologist named Michelle Gelfand who wrote a book called Rule Makers, Rule Breakers, about how culture has a tendency to tighten and loosen in response to cultural changes. Okay. In times of fear, like now, we tend to get tight, right? We want to tighten the rules. When it starts to feel like the rules are too tight, we want to loosen the rules. Okay? And society has always been a battle between forces of tightening the rules and forces wanting to loosen the rules. And this applies to the Enneagram. Right? There are those who would say the Enneagram can be whatever I want it to be. I was speaking with some people a couple of years ago, a couple of Eastern European Enneagram teachers, and they were telling me that the Enneagram actually has 10 types, not 9. They had discovered a 10th type. And I asked them, well, then why do you still call it the Enneagram? Because Ennea means 9. It doesn't mean 10. Right? So if you're going to teach the Enneagram, maybe you should just have 9 types. Okay. Now, I am not opposed to changing and developing your own model of 10 types, but we have to understand that Ennea means 9, and there are certain rules we want to follow. But we also have to have the flexibility to understand that some of the ideas we've been teaching for many years no longer hold up according to what science tells us. There was a great essay by the Dalai Lama in the New York Times about 10 years ago called Our Faith in Science. And his basic premise was that he loves science. And whenever he's asked what would he do if something in science contradicted Buddhism, his response is, then we would have to change Buddhism. We can't deny science. We can't reject science just because it contradicts what we want to believe. We have to change what we believe based on the facts, based on what we learn. Okay? I think that everyone teaching the Enneagram should study evolutionary biology and should study cognitive science. We need to understand how cognitive biases affect the way we work with the Enneagram. We have to understand the effect of cognitive dissonance on holding our Ennea type structures in place. And if we don't understand what we can learn through science these days, we stay stuck in the past and we become irrelevant. Recently, my friends Claudia Nario and Ugo Kruger wrote a book called Nine Sapiens that creates a hypothesis about how the 9 Enneagram types are rooted in our evolutionary heritage. And they gave me the opportunity to read their book before it was published. And I was proud to make an endorsement of the book because they explore the science related to human nature. And they create a hypothesis. Now, I don't know if it's true or not. I don't know if what they're suggesting will hold up to the evidence, but at least they are grounding their hypotheses in modern evidence rather than old assumptions about things. Okay. This is the way that the Enneagram needs to evolve and grow. More people who are willing to do this, who are willing to challenge ideas and say, have you ever thought about it this way? Okay. And science is what can help us do that. Social media. Now, this is a little, excuse me, a little bit related to what I said about technology already, because social media is where technology affects us the most. But in 1994, there were about 10 books available on the Enneagram. Okay, maybe a few more, but now there are thousands and thousands of books. There are thousands of blogs, thousands of websites. Everybody knows about the Enneagram on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. And we live in a world where people have short attention spans. So the question becomes, how do we talk about the Enneagram in this era without losing the substance of it? Is it possible to talk about the Enneagram in a way that speaks the language that people are speaking now, without losing the substance? We've been thinking about making some videos, right, for YouTube and that sort of thing. And we have some social media advisors helping us with this. Now, they were telling us your videos can only be about a minute long. Right? And my response was, a minute? I can't say anything in a minute, right? I have more to say than just 1 minute. People will want to listen to me for more than a minute or two. But then I started realizing that every time I start to watch a video on YouTube, if I see it's longer than about 3 minutes, I stop watching, right? This is what we all do, okay? So we have to think about how can we communicate to people in this era in a substantive way. Now, we might ask ourselves, well, maybe we should just shouldn't try. The Enneagram is too deep, it's too rich, it's too profound. It's only for the people who are willing to do the work. But I challenge that assumption. Okay? I challenge the idea that you can't present ideas about the Enneagram in a short time in a way that will draw people in. And those who want to go deeper will now know about the Enneagram and will know where to go deeper. But if we just assume that you have to either go all in and go deep or not go at all, we will lose the opportunity to share the Enneagram with so many people. Okay? I get very, very frustrated when I go on social media and see what people write about the Enneagram. It depresses me. It makes me frustrated because I think these people are distorting this incredible tool. But I have to continue to remind myself that this is always the way things have been. Plato said that we should not read or write, because if you read, no, I'm sorry, it was Socrates. Socrates said that we should not write, we should not read books, because it makes you intellectually lazy. You should remember your ideas and you should share them verbally. Now, Socrates lost that argument, okay? And I remember thinking, oh, I don't ever want to give up real books, right? I like real books, and I still do. I still buy books, but now I read them on Kindle, right? or I read them on my phone. As someone who has written my whole professional life, I get very frustrated that people don't read so much anymore, and that they want to take in their information visually, right? Through videos, through audio. I get frustrated by that, and I can either continue to write and have nobody read it, or I can communicate in the way that people want to be communicated to. Okay. Each of us, especially as teachers of the Enneagram, need to commit to seeing ourselves as communicators and teachers, not somebody wedded to an old way of doing things. So we have to address the challenges of social media and adapt to the opportunities for them. Now, my initial thought as I was planning this was to have everybody go into a breakout room for short discussion. But unfortunately, we don't have the capacity here to do that effectively. So the question I was going to ask everyone before I continue is, given what you have experienced during this COVID period, what benefits have you found in your work with the Enneagram, in your teaching of the Enneagram? How have you adapted in ways that opened new horizons for you? For me, for example, it has been this idea that I can get more done from my basement office than I can spending my time on airplanes all the time. Right? I can communicate to people in a broader setting through videos and podcasts and that sort of thing. Okay. If you have any ideas that you'd like to share with people on this, please write it in the chat. Okay. And towards the end, we'll take some questions and maybe share some of the comments you have. So please feel free to write them. So some messages, some lessons I have learned and thought about and would like to share with you related to what we've discussed. Number one, we have to adapt to the new realities. And the way to do that is by practicing acceptance and disidentification. When people ask me what are the qualities, the essential qualities that a leader has to have, I say there's only one: the ability to adapt, the ability to recognize what skills, what tools I need now, right, based on my circumstances. And then they have to develop those skills and those tools. There are no other universal qualities that a leader needs to have. And it's what a human needs to have as well. Right? So the way we can adapt to new realities is by practicing what we call the accelerators, right? These things that promote growth. And the accelerators at points 1 and 4 are acceptance and disidentification. When we talk about acceptance, we're not talking about resignation. Oh, well, it's a new world. What are you going to do? We'll just have to suffer and die. Okay. That is not acceptance. Okay. Acceptance is being aware of our emotional reactions to things and letting go of them. It's only then that we can create change. I was angry about COVID changing the world, that now the next time I go to Buenos Aires, I will probably have to pay to go myself instead of being paid to go there. Okay. Now, I can be frustrated by that, and I can be angry and depressed, which I was, but I need to adjust to it. I need to let go and accept that it's a new world. And by disidentification, we're talking about recognizing these old ideas of ourselves that we've been holding on to, that we cling to. Okay. My identification as a writer. I am proud of the fact that I have written books. But if I continue to hold that as a point of pride and realize that my children will never read any of the books that I wrote, okay, that the way to get to them is through video, right, through other means. Okay. So I have to disidentify of this idea of a communicator, I'm sorry, as a writer, and see myself as a communicator now. So acceptance and disidentification are critical. We have to embrace technology. I hate it. I hate Zoom. I hate trying to manage breakout rooms, right? I hate trying to manage technology. I want to be with people. I want to talk to people face to face. Okay? But again, Socrates hated books. Okay? We have to adjust and adapt. We have to embrace technology. Here's one of the things that I think is really, really important, and it's a point I've been trying to emphasize for years. Okay? Now, I work in organizations. I do public Enneagram trainings. I work with people who are not in the corporate world. But people in organizations have short attention spans. They are busy. They have a lot of responsibility. They need information in a useful format. That is even more critical today. Okay? We have to stop being pulled toward the complexity of the Enneagram. And we have to embrace a mindset of robust simplicity. What do I mean by that? When I am reading a newspaper article in the morning, I still get a physical newspaper. I love to hold the newspaper in my hand and read it. But when I'm reading the articles, I read the first sentence or two, or maybe just the headline, and then I move on to something else. Okay? Because I know that if that headline and first paragraph get my interest, I can read deeper. Okay. When we are teaching the Enneagram, we have to present it in a way that encapsulates the most fundamental ideas in a simple way. For me, when people ask me what the Enneagram is, what I tell them is it's a model that shows us the habitual patterns we become stuck in. Okay? And it shows us how we can get out of those habitual patterns. It tells us that those patterns are rooted in 9 adaptive strategies, that those strategies influence the way we want to feel, right? We are trying to capture a feeling state that tells us everything okay. For me as an 8, I want to feel powerful, right? For Viviana as a 3, she wants to feel outstanding. A 1 wants to feel perfect. A 9 wants to feel peaceful. Okay? And so we start to think in ways that reinforce that. And we start to behave in ways that are consistent with that. So these strategies are simply a way of feeling, thinking, and doing that shapes how we interact with the world. And it shows us that we can rewrite those strategies in a way that makes us more adaptive. So when I teach the Enneagram, I am not trying to create Enneagram experts in my coaching clients or the people that I'm working with. I am trying to give them useful information that they can apply in a lot of ways after my work with them is done. So when we think about the Enneagram, we have to acknowledge tradition. We have to understand the complexity of it. We have to know the virtues and the vices and the holy ideas, right? We have to know about the connecting points. But we don't always have to emphasize that when we're teaching people at first. We need to be able to teach it in a way that's simple and then can lead to complexity and sophistication if people want it. We also have to understand that we don't have to be trapped by the traditions. Again, there are people who want the Enneagram to be just this and nothing else. Okay? Nothing that stops growing lives for long. They die off eventually, and we don't want that with the Enneagram. One more lesson. Okay? We have to be epistemologists. Okay? Epistemology is the branch of philosophy that helps us understand what is true and what is not. In the world of social media, we are bombarded all the time with bullshit. Okay? I apologize for being blunt here. Perhaps my translators will put more gracious translations onto that term, but the world is filled with nonsense. And we have to be able to tell the difference. We have to understand that there is a difference between our subjective opinions and objective truth. We have to be open-minded, but we have to be willing to challenge ideas. If we don't commit to this, the Enneagram will wither and die. One final thought. I've had the opportunity to travel to some very remote places. I remember standing in the desert in Nevada, about an hour outside of Las Vegas. And it was an extremely hot day. And it was very still. There was no breeze, right? There was no vegetation anywhere, no plants, no trees. And as I was walking along, I looked between some rocks and I saw a little sprout coming up in a handful of dirt. And it reminded me that even in the harshest of conditions, life finds a way. Okay? No matter how bleak things are, there's always opportunity. The message of the Enneagram can help get us through these times. It reminds us that the problem is our fixations, okay? Our fixations with our identity, our fixations with the past. Okay? And it reminds us that the opportunity for growth is in the ability to adapt to the reality of our situation. Okay? So even in times of great transformation, the message of the Enneagram is still the same. Okay, still the same as every wisdom tradition has been. Okay? Pay attention. Recognize how we're being pulled into the past, how we're being frustrated by reality, and learn that we can take control of the way we interact with our world. And we do that by understanding our type and using the Enneagram as a growth for tool. So I'd like now, if there are, we have just a couple of minutes left. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. There are a lot of comments. So there's one question here, and I apologize. So do we have Enneagram research is going to support this? Not much that I am aware of. So when I talk about science and the Enneagram, there's two ways to think about it. One is the idea of trying to prove the Enneagram in some way, okay, that the Enneagram is real. I don't know how to do that, and I don't know how science can do that, and I don't know that that is necessary, okay? I don't think we need to prove that the Enneagram is real, that the Enneagram is true, because the Enneagram is useful, whether it's scientifically proven or not. What we need to be careful about, in my view, and where science can help us, is to make sure that we don't embrace magical thinking and pseudoscience. Okay. We have to make sure that anything we associate with the Enneagram does not violate what we know through science. Okay. If somebody someday finds a way to prove the Enneagram scientifically, that would be great. I don't think it's necessary, however, right? For me. Okay. All right. So we're about out of time. So thank you for the comments here. Let's see. Cecilia, can you hear me? Are you able to talk and wrap us up here? Is there anything that we should address before I stop talking?
Hi Mario, wait a minute please.
Okay.
Ceci, si abrís con la tablet Podés hablar con Mario si abrís tu micrófono.
Okay. Mario, can you hear me?
I hear you. Yes.
Oh, Matthias does magic. He's great. The greatest thing we've
He's a gifted
found
man.
so far. He's gifted, no doubt. So, thank you, Mario. I don't know if hay preguntas, Mati, para que le traduzca.
No, mayormente hay muchos que están pidiendo la traducción la certificación de Mario en español, por lo que veo acá en los comentarios del chat.
Mario, there's a lot of people asking about your certification in Spanish. So I will get in charge of that, of writing down in the chat during the day. So I'll do that. Vamos ya le dije a Mario que me voy a ocupar yo de que esté en el chat la certificación de Mario en español, cómo contactarse y demás. Así que en un ratito lo van a tener. ¿Le leemos alguna otra pregunta, Mati? Si me decís alguna. There are a lot of thank you, Mario. Everybody thanking you.
Any criticisms you don't have to translate.
Mario dice que las críticas no las traduzca. There are no.
I see a hand up from Alex. The question, do we have time to answer, Alex?
Okay. Alex levantó la mano. Alex, ¿querés preguntar algo?
One question, Matthias. Go ahead, Alex.
Alex. No te escuchamos, Alex.
He's muted. There you go. Oh, not muted.
¿Estás ahí, Ceci? ¿Vos me ves a mí? Mario.
Sí,
¿estamos? Le damos la palabra a esta persona que comentaron.
Ahí está, Alex está para conversar, sí, para preguntar.
Dale. Viste que la inmediatez queremos
Hi,
todo
how
ya.
are you? Now
Hello, Alex.
How are you? Good?
I'm very good. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. It was
Thank you.
really good, really good. I have a question for you. I don't know if maybe I understood it in a wrong way, but that's why I want to ask you about this. You said that when we are teaching Enneagram, it is very important to study a little bit of biology. And was it true that? Did I understand well?
I think that anyone who is so anyone who is teaching about human nature should have an understanding of how evolutionary biology works, okay? So we can understand the development of human nature, okay? I particularly like and recommend a book called Behave by Robert Sapolsky, okay? That is a very good introduction on this.
Perfect. Thank you very much. That was my question.
All right. And I see that Gary has a question. I know we're about out of time, but I like Gary and I remember him from the past. So I'll ask. Go ahead, Gary. What's your question?
Hola, muchas gracias. Hola.
You have a question, Gary?
Ok, gracias. Un placer estar con ustedes y agradezco el evento. Mario, es un honor escucharte. Tuve el gusto de formarme en tu modelo en Chile con María José Munita y me pareció extraordinario. Mi pregunta iría ¿de qué manera, desde el enfoque Awareness to Action, se entiende el concepto antiguo de los tres centros del enagrama, el centro intelecto, el centro corazón y el centro visceral? ¿Se usa o no se usa? ¿Cuál es su manera de entenderlo desde
Cecilia, can you translate for me? I can't hear you. I don't hear you, Cece. The joys of technology.
You're muted. Estás muteada, Ceci.
Yeah. Sorry. So, Mark, I'll tell you what, until we get that fixed out, let me respond to Marcello, please. I see your question there. The big area for me, Marcello, is around the instinctual biases. Okay. I think that, you know, what people call the three instincts or the subtypes, I think that that is an area where much of the teaching is not rooted in science. It's getting better, but for me, that's an area that's very, very underdeveloped and needs to be explored through a better understanding of biology. Okay, that's the main one. But for me, too, it's also important to understand that when we try to bring other ideas into the Enneagram teaching, we should make sure that they are consistent with science, right? So for example, I hear people talk about the triune brain sometimes, right? It's not a very scientific idea, right? And so we have to be careful about claims that we make about science. So those are the key areas, I would say. Okay. So,
Ceci,
Okay, I'm
oh,
here.
there you go. I can hear you. Okay. So,
Can you? Wow.
yes, I hear you now.
Alex's question was, if I can still remember it.
No, I got Alex's.
Too many things.
How about Gary?
Gary, it was Gary's.
Yes,
okay. I mixed them up. Gary's question was how the ATA, how the awareness to action relates, or how does the awareness to action see the three centers of intelligence?
That's a whole nother webinar in itself.
Bueno,
but
ese sería otro webinar
I'll keep it
entero,
short. I'll keep it
pero
short.
lo voy a decir en cortito.
For me, it is
Para
important.
mí,
It is important to
es
understand
importante entender
that we have a cognitive function, an
que
emotional
tenemos
function,
una
and a
función
behavioral
cognitiva
function. Okay?
del corazón y del behavioral, de la conducta.
I spoke before, I said the Enneagram strategy
Antes
is about
hablé
feeling,
de la
thinking, and doing.
estrategia del enneagrama es sentir, pensar y hacer.
We have to be careful, however,
Tenemos que
about
tener cuidado,
assuming
sin
that certain
embargo,
types
de
are head
asumir
types and
que
certain
algunas
types are
tipologías son
belly
de la
types and
cabeza,
certain
que
types are
otras
heart
son
types.
de las entrañas y otras del corazón.
It's okay as
Está
a
okay
simple idea,
como una idea simple,
but we can
pero
then start
esto
to
nos
form
puede
stereotypes
empezar a formar estereotipos, nos puede
that
hacer formar estereotipos
you know, fives can't take action in the world,
que, por ejemplo, que los 5 no pueden tomar acción,
that eights
que
don't
los
think.
8 no piensan.
I had somebody come to me one time and
Una
say,
vez
well, I
alguien
know you
se me
don't
acercó y me
read because
dijo,
you're an
ya
eight.
sé que vos no lees porque sos un 8. Claro.
And he came to me and started talking to me about my
Y me
book that
empezó
I
a hablar
wrote.
del libro que yo mismo había escrito.
So we have this stereotype
Entonces, tenemos estos estereotipos
that we have to be very careful about.
de los que tenemos que ser, con los que tenemos que ser muy cuidadosos.
So when we work with the centers, we
Entonces,
don't put
cuando
them,
trabajamos con los centros,
we don't group types into those centers.
no agrupamos tipologías en los centros.
Because I don't think that holds up
Porque
to
no
a lot
creo
of
que eso
scrutiny. Right.
Se sostenga con mucho escrutiniamiento, si la palabra existe, perdón.
So,
Escrutinio, ahí está.
so it's important to know that theory, but we don't always
Es
teach it in our
importante
work.
saber la teoría, pero no la enseñamos en nuestro trabajo.
Okay.
Bueno,
Hay
Ceci,
400 personas escuchándolo, se callan, please.
Ceci, ¿me escuchás?
Yes. Sí, perfecto.
Genial. Bueno, ya estamos en tiempo. Nos quedaríamos
Okay.
escuchando
We're out
a
of time,
Mario
right?
mucho más,
Maria
pero
says we would stay listening to you for hours and hours, but we are running out of time.
I understand.
así que agradecerle a Mario
So we
en
thank
nombre
you
de toda la comunidad latina que
on behalf of all the Latin community.
Y bueno, y en nombre de nosotros personalmente por haber
And
aceptado
also
estar acá.
on behalf of the IEA Argentina for having accepted so graciously and quickly to be here.
Yes.
It was
sí.
my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. Again, if people have questions or want my slides, they can contact me by email, and I'm happy to respond. So enjoy the rest of your conference, and I will leave you now, okay?
Ok, thank you, Mario. Lo que Mario dijo es que pueden contactarlo por su email para tener los slides, y ya les vamos a poner en el chat la información de sus cursos. Thank you,
Bueno,
Mario. See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.